Hello, everyone. How are you doing? My name is Brigida Toruño, and welcome to Uno Soul's Chat. I am honored today to be chatting with Dr. Elliott Dacher, an Uno Soul. He is a physician, an author, and a meditation teacher, and he's also someone that I like to call my guru. Welcome, Elliott.
Welcome. Thank you for having me, and happy to be here with you and your podcast family.
Thank you so much. I'm just so honored that you're here. And I'd love to know, how have you been doing as we emerge now from this surreal year of the pandemic?
Well, it's been quite okay for me. I spend a lot of time quietly and inside as it is, and so it is not all that um, unusual for me to have a lot of quiet time alone. And I live in a very pastoral environment. So
Nice.
even during the all of this, I was able to get out and to walk, and so it was fine.
Good.
I know
Very
for
nice.
others it did created its problems and its difficulties, but here it was okay.
Yeah, good. I am just so grateful for you for so many reasons. I'd like to, in a minute, tell my story of how I met you 28 years ago. But before that, I just wanted to say thank you and how grateful I am for this last year. As soon as COVID hit, you started doing a weekly meditation and Dharma talk on Sundays, which has been just life sustaining for me. And so I really wanted to say thank you so much for that.
Thank you. It's been a delight for me too. It's surprising how much you can really be with each other and share with each other and have a communion this way electronically. So it's been a great experience for me, and it continues to be so. And your podcast members are invited to join us.
Great. We'll definitely post a link when we post this so that people can join us. That would be wonderful.
Great,
Yeah.
great.
And I just wanted to tell a little story, if I could, about how we met 28 years ago. I was going through a difficult time in my life, and I didn't know what the word cope or coping skills meant. I mean, I had no knowledge of it. There was so much going on in my life. I was working full time. I was raising young kids. I was going to school at night. I was in an unhappy marriage. My father had just had, some terrible illness happen, heart attacks, strokes, and I'm an only child and felt a tremendous weight. So I called the EAP department in my corporation and I kind of said, help. And then they said, oh, Dr. Elliott Dacher. I was like, okay, I'll go there. And you were a primary physician that also did counseling. That's sort of what I went in knowing. That's all I knew about you. So I stepped into your office and my life changed forever. um, you started talking to me about mindfulness. I mean, it's such new concepts for me, mindfulness. And then we did a short meditation. Maybe you just had me start to do some breathing and a very short, like, close your eyes for a minute. And then it slowly started becoming familiar to me. I started understanding a little bit more about what you explained after each session. You introduced me to yoga, and I started going to the Health Advantage Yoga Center in Herndon that had just opened. And you introduced me to Buddhist principles. And really, I just can't thank you enough for really, I mean, what I see as saving my life. I so respect you and honor you, and you are a tremendous healer. So thank you for that.
Well, of course, you did the effort and the work yourself. So you have to thank yourself and your own motivation and your own efforts as well. So I was happy to be there and still am.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you've definitely been with me through difficult moments in my life, and maybe a couple of pleasant ones, but for 28 years, so that's been wonderful. Um, Elliott, I would love to know, how did your meditation journey start?
Mm. Well, I think it's always kind of been a part of me in the sense that I have a disposition that kind of looks around, looks on the rocks, tries to understand things, how things work, and so and so. And my orientation was always sort of psychological and philosophical. So I think it kind of was the seeds of those there, just to my basic and disposition. And then I remember in the 1970s beginning to read some books, um, and that pointed me in a direction that seemed so comfortable for me. And the um, uh, orientation of looking inside, of examining, of looking for a place deeper, more meaningful, really began to touch me.
Mm.
So in those days, which was very early, I went and learned meditation in Cambridge, Massachusetts, from the Maharishi, who came here to teach it early on,
Mm.
um, and began there. And then I think there were different points in my life in which I had made more of an effort in that direction and less. And then I began to incorporate that into my medical practice, which is where you found me.
Mhm.
And when my two girls were old enough and graduated college, I decided to just stop focusing on the outer aspects of medicine, physical aspects, which I had learned, and to learn more about the inner aspects of healing. And so I spent the next 12 years, 3 to 6 months a year, in India or Nepal, studying with the Tibetans, their
Wow.
psychology, their philosophy, their meditation practice.
Mhm.
And that's what turned me in that direction quite fully. And
Yeah.
so that really became an integral part of my life. So
Wow. Yeah.
kind of went through his peaks and valleys.
Mhm.
But it just seemed to me that this was the place that I could find what I was looking for,
Mhm.
which was some understanding, some wisdom, some sense of serenity and peace, and so on. And so it became my place to go, so to say.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great story. Thank you. Um, I can see how it sort of grew almost organically at first, right? You just felt it always be sort of part of you, and it just needed to be cultivated.
Yeah, kind of unfolded like a flower,
Mm.
You kind of feed it at the right times and give it what it needs, and it kind of opens. It's not like something's being discovered that's new. It's that something's being revealed that's old,
Yeah.
that's been present for a long time. So it had that kind of quality to it. Felt very familiar to me as I got more familiar with my inner experience, and it felt more like a home, much
Mm.
more like a home than the outer home,
Yeah.
much more steady, much more stable, much more reliable.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd like for the listeners that are beginners to meditation or who are just considering it, to know that they might have that sort of feeling or sensation that they want to grow and to see what the unfolding is, so that everybody has that opportunity.
Absolutely, it's there in everybody quite naturally. It's fairly obscured by, like the clouds obscure the sun, by our day-to-day busyness, activities, and so on. But this place of openness, of peacefulness, of contentment, of wisdom is always there in all of us. It's a question of turning ourself towards it and allowing it to reveal itself by, in many ways, just moving aside the obscurations and the veils that hide this deepest self, this natural self, this unique self that's in all of us. And we all have an experience of that at one time or another. We don't call it an inner experience, and it's a sense of flow or a sense of ease, sense of effortlessness, of joy, of delight. People may get it, the peaks of exercise and intimacy, art, beauty, dance, music. All of a sudden, something stops, and we feel in this other place that feels so beautiful and so sweet. We think it's just something that kind of floated in for the minute. But what it is really was that the activity moved away, the obstacles kind of cleared the sky, and then our true face becomes apparent to us in that sense of feelings that we have. So everybody's had this experience, but we kind of treat it as something, a good experience that comes and goes. It's just a fortunate moment, and kind of hope to have it again when it can actually be our life.
Mm. So important. Yeah, thank you. So Elliott, you have a wonderful bio. I'm not going to completely read it right now, but we will put it again in the post. We'll put your bio because you have amazing qualifications. You bachelor's from Queens College Medical School at, I don't know, is it SUNY? How do people pronounce that as one word?
SUNY, State University of New York.
Okay, in Buffalo. And then you began your medical practice in the DC area in 1975. And then in 95, I believe, is when you started exploring, the world of, more deeply, the world of meditation and starting your travels to India. So we'll post more of that in the when we post the interview. And you also have written some wonderful books. I remember when I met you, it was 1992, and you had already written at least one book by then. And so here I have a list of some of them: whole healing, intentional healing, integral health, the path to human flourishing, transitions, a guide to the 6 stages of a successful life transition, and aware, awake, and alive, a contemporary guide to the ancient science of integral health and human flourishing. And I have that book here. And so can I tell you a little story about the book?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I got divorced at the end of 2012, and I went up to Kripalu, because that was the other thing that you instilled in me 28 years ago, is to go on retreats, to look for the quiet, to look for the stillness. And that's part of who I am now. It just is. I mean, obviously in COVID, couldn't do it. I was sort of on a 1-year retreat because I live by myself. But so I was in Kripalu in upstate New York, and I walk into their bookstore, and I'm feeling a little lost and shell shocked from my decision. It was a good decision, but still difficult. And right there on the table, they had it sitting up, this book, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's Dr. Elliott Dacher. And it was such a moment of, I mean, I want to say my angels guided me to that moment, so that as soon as I may have still been there when I found, I hadn't talked to you in a few years, and I called you, and it was just wonderful to connect with you. And then you started working with me, doing some counseling. And so that was my story about this book. But it's this sort of exemplifies what you practice and teach, right? Can you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about it?
Well, that book was sort of written by groups that I work with. I taught meditation for 10 years, twice, 2 8 to 10 week sessions a year at the local hospital here. So that went over 10-year period. So there were a lot of people, maybe 500 or more that attended. And so in the process of doing that, I began to do recordings and prepare sets of notes. And those eventually got edited and eventually became that book. So it was unlike my previous books, I sat down and write. It was sort of written by itself out of the experience of working with people, generally people who had never done any meditation before,
Mm.
and teaching them about how to go about the process of reorienting their life in that direction. So that's how that book emerged. And it was really the people that I worked with that really, in many ways, wrote it.
Yeah, yeah. And I love the very first quote that you have in here by Mary Oliver, who's one of my favorite poets. Tell me what you plan to do with your one wild and precious life. I just love that quote. It says so much about the possibility, right, of finding the stillness and living like that, not just when we're have our eyes closed in meditation.
Yeah, well, most of us just live a really very automated life. In actuality, we have a set of ideas and beliefs and habits of perception and habits of reaction, and that really we live in over and over again. This becomes our world, our only world. We like to say there's 7 billion people on the planet, so there's 7 billion different worlds. So we all live within this narrow framework that we think is all to life. We all have this strange kind of yearning. We have a sense there's something more, there's something further, there's something beyond this. We never can quite touch it. We never have any more sense of it than this underlying yearning. And it's that yearning that is really the opening, the doorway by which we begin to look further, to gain more of a sense of a self, to break through our pattern, our automated lives, to reach for possibilities of our condition, of the human condition, that we never may have thought were possible. So this whole process of opening to something larger is there. It's there in all of us. And we can have that, or we can have what we have today, tomorrow, the next day, and until we leave this earth. So the whole process of learning how to open into a life in which we flourish and thrive rather than just exist is what meditation begins to offer. It
Mm.
doesn't offer anything new. It offers what's already there, except we can see it and we can be with it. And we don't get stuck in our own patterns all the time, our own reactivity, our own interpretations. So something new opens up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's beautiful. All of the chapters are wonderful and just so much great information and to learn a practice. Um, I wanted to read a couple of sentences from chapter 14 on serenity, if I could. It says, the unique qualities of human flourishing unfold sequentially like the petals of a flower. They are the result and ultimate reward of a well-lived life. The emergence of these qualities is like the spontaneous scent of perfume emanating from a mature flower. Once a seed is planted and cultivated and the greenery and flower unfold, the aroma of perfume is spontaneously and naturally present. It is the same for the qualities of human flourishing. We do not have to concern ourselves with the fruits of our efforts. If we properly cultivate the field of our life, these sweet fruits will arise naturally and effortlessly. I love that. That's so poetic.
Thank you. So what you're reading there is probably different than what most people think of when they think of meditation. When most people think about meditation, they think about relaxing, reducing stress, having a quiet oasis, being able to live a more peaceful life. And that really is sort of the first more surface purpose of meditation, which is to create a healthier human life, to cultivate an easier way of living, improved relationships, more peace, more relaxation, and so on. But if we stop there, we really have gotten the booby prize. because that is an upgrade of our day-to-day ordinary life, and that's great. It's important to improve our day-to-day ordinary life as we can. But that is not really the ultimate aim of meditation. The ultimate and really true aim of meditation is to go beyond our ordinary life, the limitations of our belief systems, of our patterns of perception and reactivity, and to explore what it is to be beyond that, to be beyond our personal nature, what it is to be whole and connected, to be to have a serenity that surpasses understanding, that doesn't just drop back into busyness as soon as the relaxation technique meditation is over. How to have happiness without a reason, that is happiness that is just part of our nature, contentment that isn't dependent on doing this or doing that, but just being. So there's this whole quality of life that's open, that's always there if we can but see it and live in it and break through the barriers to it, that is so much more and so different than actually simply living a good life, even an upgraded good life. Even the most self-developed, self-actualized life is always still limited by our selfness, of defensiveness, our protectiveness, our individuality. So as we move beyond, we begin to experience a world that's much more of the nature I said before, effortless, easeful, free, flowing. And this is really the main emphasis in meditation. So learning is simply to relax will help a bit. And as soon as we're through with the technique, the stress will come back again. So we're learning how to transform our life, how to shift it from, let's say, channel 1 to channel 2, and to live in a much different way.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And I think you call it this the meditation 1.0, right? That's the meditation that you speak of that is about relaxing, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's a great goal. I think that that's probably what I learned 28 years ago. And I mean, I've been meditating just about every day, probably not every day since for 28 years, but I'm very aware if I'm not meditating. And I do it as soon as I wake up. And and then and then there's this meditation 2.0, right? Which you also call it that, which is what you just talked about in terms of to be able to move beyond looking at it as only relaxation, but going to that place to our natural self, to our beingness. And I think that just really this last year is work in attending your weekly meditation talks is when it's really started to sink in a little bit. I mean, it's such a practice because I feel like I sometimes I'm just in a trance, I make mistakes and I live in my ego and, I mean, but I am aware when it happens. So maybe that's a step in the right direction.
Well, it's not really all that difficult because the peace, the serenity, the wholeness, the connectedness, the compassion, love, and wisdom is already there. Our ability to just be present and be aware and rest in a natural state is there every moment. Mm-hmm. So it's not like we have to create something. It's not as hard as the effort of trying to relax and then quiet the mind and keep it quiet. Well, we can just develop the skill of just dropping in. It's very, very simple to just be quiet, to be peaceful, to be present to ourselves. It's very natural. It's not a great effort. It requires some pointing out, some suggestion, but it's not really a learning process. We don't have to learn who we are. We're already that already. It's a question of unlearning who we think we are, right, and allowing ourselves to just naturally rest in who we actually are. So meditation, in a sense, is not really meditation. It's just being present, alive and aware and easeful and living now rather than living in memory and past experience and all of those kinds of complexities that are in our day-to-day ordinary kind of created self that we believe so strongly in.
Yeah, yeah. So you talk about being present, and you have you talked to us during this past year about the steps to embodying presence. Um, and if you could explain them, I mean, I have some things written down. I have four steps to embody presence.
Well, what are they? What you got written down?
Yeah, I have first of all to have a daily sitting practice. So and that's the foundation. And then number two is to recognize when you're caught in self-sabotaging personal mode slash self. So yeah, so I can recognize that. And then number three is to stop and be still and breathe. And to ask, who am I? Sort of, I mean, just that stopping and investigating almost. And then number four, that from there you can drop into the presence.
Right. So I think that's a good way of looking at it. To begin, you have to recognize when you really are stuck in your ordinary patterns. You can feel the intensity, you can feel the automaticity, you can feel the tension, you can feel the stress. You can feel when you're caught, you can sense it. And then you begin to learn to stop then. Because anything that's going to continue from there is going to be nothing but a problem.
Mm.
So you have to just stop everything, get out of the way, so to say.
Mm.
And once you've seen it and stopped, you've already begun to observe what's happening. And then you're separate from what's happening. Because if you could say to me, look, this isn't right, or I'm stuck in anger, or I'm stuck in reactivity, you already are observing the experience that you're having. And when you're observing the experience that you're having, the observer can't be the observer and the experience at the same time. So you've opened up some space, some gap between that part of you that is witnessing or watching the anger, the irritation, the annoyance, the stress, and the stress itself. So that's a transitional state because you're no longer joined, merged with this automatic pattern or reactivity. You're now somewhat separate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the observer does not have the same history as the actual thing it's observing. That is the anger, the past history, stuff that comes up, the interpretations, commentary. The observer doesn't have that. The observer is free of the past history. So you begin to slowly live in that observing quality, that awareness, that presence. And as that begins to become stronger, what happens is the experience itself begins to soften, begins to dissolve. And slowly, without suppressing it, trying to get away from it, it begins to just dissolve right back in to the mind and leave more stillness, more presence, and awareness. And then one just rests in that. So this, of course, takes a little practice, but it's a lot less exhausting and a lot less work than staying with one's patterns until just you get so exhausted you stop. So this process of stopping, of recognizing, of observing, and then resting in the awareness and the presence is really all that it takes. And you're not really doing anything except getting out of the way, those obstacles, those things that have covered over your consciousness that are allowing you to see who you really are. Because you're not that anger, or those emotions, their feelings, they're things just picked up over time with your own history and memory. And when you are in this presence or awareness, you no longer can find the ordinary self. If you go look for Brigitte, she won't be there anymore. Not in the way that you know her. There'll be awareness, there'll be presence, there'll be a sense of self, but it won't be this kind of changing self that's really driven by past experience, by memory. It'll be just a self that's aware and present in the moment. And then you're there. And you practice that during sessions. You bring that into your daily life, dropping into it, listening from it, acting from it. So slowly over time, it becomes one's life. So the foundation of life shifts.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And um, but it does take discipline. Would you say it's discipline?
Well, in a sense, when you begin to realize that the way we're living life, or the way we seek to find satisfaction or peace or happiness in day-to-day life, its relationships, its work, etc., really works to provide us with a sustaining experience of peace and happiness. Just doesn't. The world changes moment to moment to moment. There's no stability in it. Everything that comes goes. Everything that's we have a sense of connection with disconnects in time. So we begin to get frustrated with, exhausted with, and lose faith in our day-to-day experience. This is just not working for me. No matter what I do, it doesn't seem to be right. I do the same thing over and over, do it a little better, do it a little different. Still doesn't seem to be giving. Find myself in the same place. So when you get disgusted enough and frustrated enough with the sense that this is the way it has to be, and you realize it's not working, the motivation to change becomes fairly simple, because the other alternative just doesn't work.
Mm.
And then if you begin to feel some of the return and rewards from being more situated and living more from your natural self, you begin to be pulled by that.
Hmm.
And it actually becomes quite effortless over time.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, there is a process of discipline. There's a process of letting go, and a process of becoming more receptive.
Hmm.
And then it opens. There's nothing you can do to make it happen. What you can do is create circumstances for which it opens naturally by itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for explaining that.
Alternatively, you get lost in seeking that something more to life in your everyday experience. And you have a good experience here, a good experience there. You hang on to it, you grasp onto it, get attached to it. You need more of it because it kind of dilutes itself out in terms of how good it feels. And there's an addiction process, and it disappears, then you go for more. I mean, it's an endless cycle of desire and attachment. It doesn't ever lead to any peace for anybody. Moments of happiness, yes. Moments of relaxation, yes. But ultimately, it doesn't work. When you get that, you begin to say, well, where did people go? Well, we're looking for more. And then you see that throughout culture and across time, this journey to uncover our innerness, our wholeness, our serenity, it's natural to us, has been there in every culture and every society. And so it's spoken of so universally that we know it's a human experience that is universal. And
Mm.
that's what we begin to move towards.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I think you started off by saying you sort of start feeling like, okay, well, this isn't working. So, what I'm doing right now in my life. So let me try this alternative over here. So,
Right.
yeah. There's this idea of getting off the cushion, right? So the idea that you can study with the best of teachers, um, but that the real work really starts when you get into the real world. And what are your thoughts about that?
Well, meditation isn't meant to be a kind of otherworldly experience. It's really a process that introduces us to our natural self and to the qualities of what it is to live with that. And so, actually, when you're really doing meditation of that sort, rather than using a technique that generates temporary relaxation, when you're actually doing that kind of meditation, you're really not doing a meditation. Even though you're practicing it in a circumscribed period of time, what you're really doing is simply opening to the serenity, the naturalness that's always there. You're not doing a technique, you're just kind of dropping in, opening up. So it's not like when we stop the more concentrated effort to experience this in a circumscribed period of meditation, that all of a sudden we go back to something else. We just continue being in that space. Now, we're so used to being really caught up in our patterns and our history and our way of being in the world, because that's what we practice our entire life. And our personal self, our usual self, will pull us back into that and take us away from this space, making us think in part, oh, this is just a special space. I can only have at a special time. That's not so, of course. So what we do is we begin to bring it into daily life. We do that by remembering that place we dropped into and dropping into it periods of time during the day, a few minutes here, a few minutes there. We can use some breathing techniques that will drop us in a little bit more quickly. We can practice listening to others by really listening, and every time commentary comes up in our mind or a reaction to what's being said, we kind of let that drop away and stay with the listening. We can practice mindfulness in our activities. So there are many ways we can practice being present. And in time, particularly if we're doing a daily practice, it's more concentrated, we begin to notice strange things happening in life. One of them was we begin to notice we're less reactive. We're calmer. Situations and people that used to disturb us for some odd reason, never ascribed to the meditation practice, for some odd reason they seem easier. And we don't seem to get worked up so quickly. There seems to be a gap that opens, which we can make some choices about how we want to respond rather than reactively. Our life seems to be calmer, more still. We seem to have less interest in activities that we used to have before that basically were keeping us busy to keep us away from the feelings of stress and distress. So activities become less important. They drop off. That may be a party we don't need to go to. Endless conversations we don't need to be a part of that bring us nothing but distraction. Could be as simple as not turning the radio on in the car, taking more quiet time. So we see these things begin to naturally creep into our life. And then with that, our life begins to undergo this slow transformation. Now, to say that is true, it does. But it isn't that in any moment something is really transforming. It's just we're increasingly experiencing, as the foundation of our day-to-day experience, this open, spacious, expansive self, rather than this more contracted ego structure, which is defensive, protective, manipulative, controlling, always looking out for itself, kind of always underneath there. And it's from there that we usually live the world, in a place of fear, anxiety, or constant vigilance. So slowly that has taken place. What takes place of that is this naturalness. And we begin to have that as the foundation of our day-to-day experience.
Yeah, that's great. And it's interesting because you mentioned, you start to see slow changes in yourself. And I remember 3 to 4 years, maybe even 5 years after I started meditating, I was commuting from Loudoun County, Virginia to DC for work. And I remember sitting in traffic because there was always so much traffic in this area. And nothing was bothering me. Nothing was affecting me. I would look over and see the other drivers who just seemed, to be upset and angry, to be sitting in the traffic and the, road rage that happens. I was feeling nothing. And I remember just thinking, what is this? What happened? But it's been like that ever since. Traffic does not affect me in the least. And I'm going to say that that's because of meditation.
Yeah, it's not that nothing is happening. The past and your reactivity isn't happening. And when that begins to drop away, there is a sense of openness and spaciousness and ease and peace. It's just naturally there. It feels like nothing because it's empty of the usual chatter and content. But really, there's an awareness, presence, and ease, and effortless and you're really experiencing life fully in that moment. And the nothingness really isn't everythingness. It is a sense of connectedness, okayness, well-being.
Yeah. Yeah. And in terms of so getting off the cushion, to me it also means the idea that, that I listen to different teachers. For instance, I'm a voracious reader, and I've read all kinds of books from spiritual teachers, and I listen to podcasts and different meditations and different Dharma talks, um, and I love it. I love it. But I think that at some point I have to live it. And I think I do somewhat, right? Because it's this new way of being has been ingrained in me for many years. But I mean, do you find that you're still reading and listening to a lot of things, or should I slow that down?
Well, I mean, it's certainly helpful to be as a reminder. So I
Mm.
think all the things that help remind one are helpful. And
Mm.
but in the end, it's an experience.
Mm-hmm.
Actual experience cannot be learned,
Mm-hmm.
cannot be taken from teachers or from books.
Mm-hmm.
All that teachers and books and videos, etc., do is they sort of unclutter the space. They sort of clean the room.
Mm-hmm.
They sort of open the window. And if by grace what comes in is this experience revealing itself, then you experience it. So we're sort of preparing a receptivity and openness, kind of cleaning up the obstacles that are in the way. And the more we do that, the more we are ready for it. Do
Mm-hmm.
we have 5 or 10 minutes to do a little of this with your listeners?
Yes, we do. I was going to ask you if you could, please. That would be wonderful.
Good. So maybe you will call. We will too also close our eyes. Just take a few deep breaths. Just let them out and just hold the breath for a few moments. And that will still the mind just a bit. So just deep breath in, blow out all the noise in the mind. Pause the breath. You'll feel a unique stillness when you pause the breath. Do a few of those. When you pause the breath, there's a physiologic reaction that takes place in the brain. It stills the mind naturally, so there's no effort involved. So after you blow out the content of the mind, you just take a pause, a hold, and you just experience the lack of chatter, the relative lack of chatter. The longer you pause, the more still you'll get. So you can do this 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, until your mind kind of stills. We're going to move from there, even though in your own personal experiences you can use it for longer periods or even shorter periods during the day. Just return to your natural breath. Now, if you're going to a temple or into perhaps somebody's house, you might leave your shoes outside. So what I'm going to ask you to do as we go into this inner self is to leave outside some of your usual activities, your ordinary sense of self. You keep in by leaving outside or letting just drop off of you thoughts, feelings, images, mental pictures. Just let them drop away naturally. This means don't give them attention. They rise, just leave them alone. Let them dissipate. Your doubts, confusion. Drop off. Judgments. Your usual identity, husband, wife, teacher, student, worker. They come and go anyway during life. Just let it go for this exercise. Leave it outside or let it just drop off of you. Still the memory. Let go of all past history and experience. Experience as everything drops away. Of expansive openness, sort of an ease, an effortlessness, naturalness. Nothing to go, no place to go, nothing to do, no memory, no history, no personal self. All you have to do is just be here right now. Just be present. Allow your natural self to open. It has no face or no physical characteristics, this natural self. Just a sense of openness, expansiveness, ease, effortlessness, serenity, presence, beingness. As you experience this natural self, you can answer some of these questions, but allow the answers to come spontaneously rather than think them. Is this natural space, this well-being, something you created, imagined, or is it simply there? Is there or can there be any distress there? Suffering? All of which is related to past history, and there's no memory of past history. This natural self is as sweet as it was from the day you were born. It's never accumulated any history or any trauma or any memory. It's always there. Does it seem far away from you? Or does it seem who you are? Mind will continue to generate thoughts or feelings or images. That's okay. That's what the mind does. But you need not attend to them. Give them attention. Feed them with your attention. Just let them come and go. Like clouds in the sky or waves on the ocean surface. You remain in the presence with the awareness. Witnessing but not getting involved. Natural, peaceful, allowing. Just rest and abide in your natural self. It's not that your personal self isn't still there someplace in consciousness. It's just a little kind of acquired piece of consciousness that you learn to believe in. But it isn't who you truly are. That has been there from the beginning. It has no history. It's expansive. You can witness the presence of your personal self someplace in consciousness, but it is not that. So, having just this brief journey, we don't have to leave that place. We can come back and join each other in conversation. You can open your eyes when you're comfortable.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that, I definitely feel like I'm in a different place from 10 minutes ago before you started the meditation. Um, so, yeah, I'm very grateful.
Nothing changed externally.
Yeah.
You're still there, sitting in the room and doing what you're doing. We're having a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But underlying that is something that's more solid, unchanging, serene.
Yeah.
So that when you meet from there the difficulties and challenges of day-to-day human life,
Mm-hmm.
you are meet it from a place of unchanging serenity and peace. So
Mm-hmm.
you're able to move through the difficulties in a clear way, in a truthful way, and always remaining peaceful and content inside, even in the most difficult circumstances. And I'm sure you know people like that,
Mm-hmm.
naturally like that. And so it is this ability to have this underlying foundation that allows us to be in life easily, peacefully. We don't feel any needs or desires in this place. Everything is completed and finished. It doesn't need anything we need to do. You can just be and be present for others, for the world.
Yeah.
So it's slowly developing this inner foundation that's most important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for this, and how beautiful if this could be taught to our young kids in school and on through and throughout the world, and and really reflect our one humanity.
Well, it is being taught more and more, and even here where I live, it is being taught in the elementary schools, in the high school. So there are many, many more programs that are teaching people. Teaching is such a poor word. Allowing people to experience their natural sense of self, their natural peace. It
Mm-hmm.
is the only unchanging place in the world. Everything else is changing. When you have this rock of stability inside, you can let change take place. You know, like the clouds move through the sky, you don't get all worked up about it. So you can deal with all the kinds of difficult things of human life from a place of peace and serenity, and it changes all of it.
Yeah. 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 Thank you. Elliott, you usually close um, our Sunday classes with a poem, and there's one that touched me quite a bit, that you towards the beginning of COVID, of the pandemic, you read to us. Do you mind if I read it, if I share it? This is the Shantideva prayer. Um, May I become at all times, both now and forever, a protector of those without protection, a guide for those who have lost their way, a ship for those with oceans to cross, a bridge for those with rivers to cross, a sanctuary for those in danger, a lamp for those without light, a place of refuge for those who lack shelter, and a servant to all in need, for as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain. Until then, may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. Elliott, I'm so grateful that we got to chat. Thank you for spending the time and illuminating our listeners. This is a powerful time for all of us to love each other, to continue to unite, and to live in peace. I honor the light in you.
Same to you. Thank you for the time together.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to Uno Souls Chat. You can find us at www.unosouls.com and on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I would love to hear from you if you would like to chat with me. Have a beautiful week and see you at the next episode.